Okay, I think I figured out all the mic issues. Okay, so last week I ran a Roll20 game for Free Spacer, and it went really good, but I have a lot of stuff that I want to say about how that went. And so this week I'm going to be doing a post-mortem for that game. How do I start? Okay, so I'm going to do this probably like good, the bad, the ugly methodology. There's probably better ways of doing it, but that's just what popped into my brain when I was thinking about it. So, how do we start? Well, I guess the best thing about Roll20 had to be the fact that I got to play my game with 5 different players from all over, well, in this case, the U.S. I had people from Florida and people from Arkansas and San Diego or something, all over the place. So that was really cool because a lot of people would probably never get to play my game. They're not going to come from places like they're not going to go to Seattle to play my game or come up here to Canada or anything, up to Vancouver. So it was really cool being able to play with all those different people. It was also really nice to be able to like record the game so I could show people how the game would work, how it would be played. Being able to stream that live, I mean, I don't have a lot of followers or anything, so there's a few people who watched, and now I've posted over the last week, I've managed to post all 3 parts. And we'll see. A few people are going to look at it as things ramp up. More people get interested in the game. They'll be able to look back at that and see how the game runs mostly. Another good thing is it's really flexible for indies. It doesn't really force you to do anything particular. Like I've seen some other tabletop simulators back in the day, and they all kind of forced you into playing a very specific way, forced you to run in a very specific way with certain rules. That was all great features most of the time, but Roll20 is kind of open. I always thought that was a really good thing. And finally, I guess the last really good item would be that community. I mean, I didn't really know any of the people that was playing the game. They all came via the LFG, the Looking for Group system. And the only one I'd actually had any contact with was through Google Plus community, who is a Roll20 guy. Like, as in a guy who plays lots of Roll20 games, a guy named Brayan, and he actually helped me figure out how to get my dice rolling mechanic to work on Roll20 several months ago. So I was really happy when he turned out to be joining me for the game. So, the bad, I guess. So we should probably talk about the bad stuff. Roll20, we had a lot of dropouts for player technical reasons. We started with 4 players and ended with 4 players, but they weren't the same 4 players. We had someone show up an hour late for the game, which you don't normally have. Well, if you're lucky, it doesn't normally happen with your home game. So that was kind of different. And one of the guys who was in the game dropped out after an hour and a half, just kind of dropped off. And we had several flicker outs. People had to rejoin, stuff like that. I think next time I might try the Hangout system, using Hangouts to do that. So I guess this is where I start talking about all the stuff you have to do for the game. And that kind of is part of the bad. Because you have to load up a lot of different stuff. Especially for a game that isn't set up. There's character sheets you have to make. And you have to get all this stuff up on there. I didn't do enough tokens. I didn't put up enough stuff there. And it just made it harder. It was pretty much made my prep take an entire week. And I still didn't really feel super ready. Like, we didn't have everything we needed. I had to pull up random tokens during the middle of the game, that sort of thing. Roll20 is really based around the character sheets, which is really awesome. But it's also, you can't just use a regular character sheet. You can put them up as handouts, but then you can't alter the handouts, so you have to put them up as a character sheet if you want to alter or change them, or have them in there. But you can't just use. My original plan was to use a PDF as the backdrop for the character sheet, and maybe just put some interactivity over top of that. But I couldn't get that to work. I managed to get the character sheet as a background, but everything I put over it, I couldn't line it up. I guess that comes down to one of the things is really ugly. You got to use HTML and CSS, and I haven't used that in a few years, and that was quite difficult. Mostly just, how do I remember how to do HTML, and how do I get the CSS to look really good? And it's a lot of work. So you can't really play without those character sheets either. So I ended up pulling it out and remembering HTML from back in the day and CSS code, and put it all through and built full character sheets. But they weren't as nice as the ones I had at home. And you can't have a group sheet. My game has multiple sheets that we would call like group sheets that the group are supposed to be able to work with and alter during play. First, there's the ship sheet, and that ship sheet is very it's like a character sheet for the entire group, and it sets certain things for different characters and stuff for the different crew members, and they all pilot that ship together. So when it came to play, they couldn't really use it. I ended up having to load it up as a handout, and then that didn't really work, so I reloaded it up as its individual page. So it meant every time anybody needed to deal with the sheet, we had to go to it, and I ended up just changing the sheet myself. There's also a contract with every episode in Free Spacer that you negotiate during out. It kind of represents all your deals and financial issues and all that sort of stuff. And everybody kind of needs access to that. I ended up running that as a page as well. And I ended up doing all the typing in that because, people didn't know Roll20 that well, and it wasn't a sheet. If that was like a group sheet as well, it would have made it a lot easier. It seems like a lot of the stuff that I had problems with, it was kind of bad, was dealt with some of the more communal aspects of Free Spacer. Like, again, it would be the resource system. Every crew member has their own set of resources. There's bond, reactor power, local credits for doing economy stuff, and there's a couple other little things like that you need to move down, like armor and stuff, and that's all pretty it works, but you need to write API to do that. And I spent so much time working on the HTML CSS code side of the sheets that I never got to learning how to use the API, and it seemed pretty complicated. It's JavaScript. I've used JavaScript, but just jumping in and doing that, I mean, I don't know how most people would do that. My game also uses dice pools. Now, they've done a lot of API work for certain games that use dice pools. The Fantasy Flight Star Wars is probably the closest that they've done, because it uses both good dice and bad dice. But copying their stuff's not easy. They use a very complicated system. Looks great. I would love to get that set up for mine and an API. I mean, mine uses a D10 dice pool called Task Dice and a D6 dice pool called Threat Dice, and they minus from each other. It's simpler than the Star Wars system in a lot of ways, but it has that same sort of, you need these two different things and you need to compare them. And the dice pool system there allows you just to you have to do successes and then I had to minus them, so all my misses showed up as a negative number, which was a bit weird, but I managed to get it working. But it would have been so much nicer if you had that dice pool as a dice pool in the math. Like, you could just set up 5 die D10 pool kind of system, and then just be able to compare like that. If that notation would have been there, it would have made it a lot easier. I mean, the system I set up with Brayan worked, and it added like one weird math in between, because I have doubling of the 10s. The 10s are worth 2 hits instead of everything else, it's like, which is only worth 1 hit. So that made it a little difficult. The resources thing comes back again, because as a GM, I have a complication resource that I want players to be able to see. At home, I have like a bowl, and I put dice in it, and it goes bling when you put the dice in, and people hear that, and they're like, oh man, we're digging a hole, things are getting more tense, and it has a really great effect. But they don't have anything like that you can really do in Roll20. I ended up on every page putting a number that I had to remember from another page. I guess that is... So, if they just had the... And I have to figure out, I guess, if I'm going to keep using this, I'd have to figure out how to write an API that would give me a resource that I could move around, that could always be visible, that would build up in front of the players and stuff. And it seems like quite a bit of work to me. I'll have to figure it out. I love it if they look like dice, but I guess that comes down to kind of a general UI issue that I generally have, is it's based on character sheets, but then you have this like map page, and you have multiple pages like this. But basing it on maps really points you... I mean, I did say it was flexible for indies, but that map-based pointing where you have those different pages for that kind of makes it based on games that are about maps. My game has a bunch of maps, but I don't know if they're the most important aspect of the game. It seems to make it work for most games. You would want more of like a tabletop focus, where you'd have this tabletop and you could put different maps on that tabletop and turn them off and on. You could have like a central map and then like side map things, or side widgets. Like if you just had a tabletop with different widgets on it, and they could be maps, or they could be pools of tokens, or they could be pools of dice, or they could be boxes of miniatures or whatever, then you could take them out of there, or click on there and scroll through the list on them, or add things to it, and you could see everybody be able to see all these things that are on the tabletop. You could also maybe have invisible things on a tabletop. So it seems to me like a tabletop focus rather than these individual pages would make a lot more sense. Finally, the worst thing, I think, was when we play a game at home, we play for about 3 to 4 hours. I don't know if that works as well on Roll20. I see people like ItMeJP run his roleplay game, and they run for an hour to an hour and a half parts, and then take breaks. But I've never really taken breaks during an RPG, so actually running like that I just didn't do it, and I had thought about it, but I didn't really know how. I think I need to get on a game with somebody like... A game with like JP would be amazing, and see how the hell he does that, because running that and being able to like jump out, in and out, and take those breaks, like do they just go offline and then stop? Like, I don't really know how it works as a player, so it's kind of hard to run as a game master. Now finally the ugly. I only have a couple points on this. They're mostly involving me, less involving Roll20. One of the most difficult things I found when running this game, especially online, is that it was very distracting. Not only when I'm playtesting my game, it's already distracting having to worry about really running it directly to the rules, because if I can't run it directly to the rules, who the hell can run it directly to the rules, right? So it seems to me that that's a pretty difficult thing to do. And then when I went on to Roll20 to do that, it got worse. So I had a serious issue with my scene framing, which is, I'm pretty dreadful at it. I just get distracted by all the other stuff that you have to do, especially with Roll20, you know, all your different, what page you're on, and explaining things, and I'm explaining the mechanics and stuff. And I just don't frame the scenes that well. And getting that buy-in from the players to get that going, that's pretty hard. So I'm trying to work on that. One of the things that really led to that was I ran a bunch of scenes I probably shouldn't have this week, or on Friday. They were scenes that didn't really have any proper risk, or maybe the opposite. I didn't come up for risk for all the scenes that I ran, and that's pretty funny because that's directly in the rules. The rules I wrote have all this stuff like you have a risk, and these are the negatives in the scene and everything. And I've gone through and made that clearer and thought a lot about how you what would be the complications of a particular scene? What are the risks the players are taking about traveling across town? If they don't have them, then you don't do that scene. It's not really necessary because there's no risk. But Free Space was written directly that way, and I still screwed it up. You just get distracted by all that stuff on the screen and all the stuff that you're trying to do, and you forget like the fundamental parts of your own damn game. I mean, this includes like the travel and negotiation scenes. The negotiations should always have these, and I realized I didn't explain them as well in the text as I wanted to, and I guess that's one of the things I really learned. That's a main thing. I mean, I wrote a big post-it note that just says risk on it. Like, I have to make sure this is called out in the text of the game, and that I follow that when I run the game. And I really did learn that from running this Roll20 game, even more than I learned it from any of my home games, because it was so more extreme, I guess. I guess the final thing, and it was ridiculous, is player luck this week. That game, it made my game look really hard because the players managed to roll horribly constantly. Like, if you watch the session, you'll see us talking about it constantly, just how badly they were rolling. They rolled -1s and -1s. We had a few 5s, but they were mostly like the piloting rolls, so they'd get somewhere fine, and then they couldn't see. I was pulling punches and running out of negatives, which is something I probably shouldn't have done. I should have just threw out the mission when they first started just rolling these dreadful rolls, and just scattered it and let them try to get back to it on their own, and just went off on this big tangent. But it's so hard because it's like a con game. It's a one-off. Nobody got to make up their characters because that would take an hour and a half. Nobody got to do... They didn't know a lot about the game. So I had to explain all that stuff. So letting them just go off the reservation and get in a bunch of trouble trying to get anywhere near the adventure was pretty intimidating to me. I didn't do it. So maybe for next time, just go, okay, well, if they take these risks and bad stuff happens, just go with it. And if they just all end up in prison and stuff, I could just make that up on the fly. I mean, the game will do that. It just seems like such a harsh thing to do to, one-shot con play gamers. I just didn't do that. So I think in the end, I really did like using Roll20. I've seen a lot of other people playing on it, and I had ambitions to play it that way, but I know more what I need to do. I need to make sure I have these character sheets. Spend some time working on the API. Maybe I can have these group sheets actually work somehow. Hopefully, I know they're doing some advancements, or they're altering Roll20, but I'm really hoping that they'll set up the ability to have group sheets. Maybe make it so you're dealing with more of a tabletop than multiple pages the way they are now, but I don't really know. I don't know what else I would use. but I love the idea of playing online and being able to run this stuff. So I might just have to put the extra work into getting it to work. I suspect one main thing I should do is actually go out and play other people's games and maybe get their advice or borrow some of their API and stuff like that, and really see how it all works on other people's things. So I guess you'll probably see me more around the LFG looking for group forum, jumping on certain games. There's probably a few out there I've wanted to play. I know there are, and I could probably jump on those. For my game, one of the things I think I need to do, and I've been working on that for most of the week, is updating the website. So I'd really have a lot of this information that I end up just having to say the whole time. Having to just blurb this all out is interesting, but it's also kind of boring, and it makes the game take a really long time. And I think if I had that and people could have looked at that, or it's online, people can look at it during play. It's something people do. They can have it as a sidebar and just be like, oh, Christoph just mentioned the Oath Alliance. What's that? Oh, here's the one-line blurb. Oh, it's this weird ex-Martian triax group that came from the Crimson Imperium and used to be part of Utmar. Oh, that's kind of neat, that sort of thing. Or what's an Atoli? Oh, it says they're this very dimorphic lizard-like species or amphibious. Oh, okay. And they'd just be able to look and see that. And so I'm working on that, and I'll probably be putting out, basically refreshing the entire website for this sort of thing. So I don't know what else I could talk about Roll20. If you have any comments or anything, you can just just make those, and we can chat on Google Plus or in the comments or whatever about that sort of thing. Anyways, that's pretty much my post-mortem. I think the game went great. Roll20CON was pretty cool, and hopefully I'll see you out there on the LFG forums. Thanks.